My beloved soul, listen carefully. God protected your soulmate connection at the last moment, and what you thought was a painful delay was actually a divine interception. There was a second when everything could have collapsed, when misunderstanding could have hardened into permanent separation, when pride could have sealed a door that heaven itself had opened. But at the final breath of that moment, when destiny trembled between union and loss, God stepped in quietly, powerfully, invisibly. Before I go any further, I am led to invite you into agreement with this word. If this message is touching your spirit, type, "I receive this," in the comments as a sign of alignment. Like this video so this word can reach the one who is about to give up. Subscribe and click the bell so you do not miss the next instruction heaven releases over your life. And if your heart genuinely feels moved to send a super thanks as a voluntary act of faith, you may do so, but hear me clearly, it is never pressure, never obligation, and never connected to receiving blessings or miracles. Your miracle is not for sale. Your union is not a transaction. Now breathe, because what I am about to reveal will shift how you see everything that almost broke you. You were not abandoned. You were being protected. That argument that seemed to spiral out of control, that silence that stretched longer than your comfort, that sudden distance that felt like rejection, none of it was random. Heaven saw a trap forming. Heaven saw words that could have been spoken in anger and remembered for years. Heaven saw external influences trying to whisper doubt into a sacred bond. And at the last moment, God slowed things down. He allowed space. He allowed confusion to expose itself. He allowed separation to prevent destruction. You thought the connection was slipping through your fingers, but in reality, it was being shielded from forces you could not see. My beloved soul, do not skip this moment, because what felt like the edge of loss was the edge of protection. There are spiritual laws around divine connections. When a soulmate bond is orchestrated by God, it becomes a target. Not because it is weak, but because it is powerful. The enemy of peace does not attack what is meaningless. It attacks what carries generational impact. Your connection carries healing for bloodlines. It carries restoration for patterns that have repeated for decades. It carries children who will grow up witnessing a love that does not run at the first storm. That is why the pressure intensified right before things were supposed to move forward. That is why misunderstandings multiplied when clarity was close. But at the final second, when one message could have ended everything, when one decision could have redirected both of your futures, heaven intervened. God softened a heart. God delayed a reaction. God redirected a conversation. God caused someone to pause instead of pressing send. You did not see the angels restraining what could have been said. You did not see the spiritual barrier placed around your names. But it happened. The silence you hated was actually a shield. The delay you resented was a recalibration. The confusion you cried over was a divine pause. Stay with me till the end, something powerful is waiting for you. I need you to understand that protection does not always look like immediate happiness. Sometimes protection looks like discomfort. Sometimes it looks like distance. Sometimes it feels like everything is falling apart, when in truth, it is being rearranged. God knew that if you both moved forward in that emotional state, the foundation would crack later. So he stopped it at the last moment. He preserved the future by allowing temporary tension. This was not rejection. It was refinement. It was heaven refusing to allow a sacred bond to be built on unstable emotions. My beloved soul, you have been asking why it almost ended. You have been replaying conversations, wondering what you did wrong. But the deeper truth is that this connection was too important to be destroyed by immaturity, fear, or outside noise. God values covenant. And when He authors a connection, He also guards it. There was jealousy around you. There were opinions around you. There were distractions attempting to pull one or both of you away. But at the last moment, something did not feel right, and that uneasy feeling was divine guidance. It prevented a decision that would have caused long-term regret. Do not leave yet, heaven has more to reveal. What you experienced was a divine test of resilience. Could the connection survive silence? Could it survive misunderstanding? Could it survive pride? And when it bent but did not completely break, heaven marked it as worthy of deeper protection. You may not realize it, but the fact that you are still thinking about each other, still feeling that unexplainable pull, is evidence that the cord was not cut. God does not allow what He has sealed to be easily severed. The enemy tried to create a permanent ending. God turned it into a temporary pause. That is the difference between divine protection and human perception. You saw an ending. God saw a timing adjustment. And the most shocking truth is this: if it had continued the way it was going in that heated, emotional, unbalanced state, you might have lost each other for years. But heaven refused that timeline. Heaven chose alignment over chaos. And now, beneath the surface, hearts are being softened. Perspectives are being shifted. Ego is being humbled. If you remain till the end, the final word will change everything. Because what God protects, He restores with greater clarity. What God delays, He strengthens. And what God shields at the last moment, He intends to reveal at the right one. And now, my beloved soul, what you must understand is that divine protection does not end at interruption, it continues into preparation. When God stepped in at that last moment, He was not only stopping destruction, He was beginning transformation. The pause you experienced was not empty space, it was sacred ground where both hearts were being confronted with truth. Pride that once felt justified began to feel heavy. Words that once seemed harmless began to echo with conviction. God has a way of allowing silence to become a mirror. In that stillness, hidden insecurities rise to the surface. In that distance, unspoken fears become visible. What almost ended your connection became the very tool heaven is using to purify it. My beloved soul, do not skip this moment, because the very tension that scared you is now working in your favor. You see, when a soulmate bond is orchestrated by God, it must pass through fire without being consumed. Fire reveals composition. It exposes what is fragile and what is forged. If your connection had been shallow, it would have dissolved permanently in that last confrontation. If it had been ego-based, it would have turned into resentment. If it had been illusion, it would have faded into indifference. But it did not disappear. It remained, even under pressure. That is not coincidence, that is confirmation. Heaven does not guard temporary infatuation. It guards divine assignments. And your connection is not merely about romance, it is about purpose alignment. There is something both of you are meant to build, to model, to release into the world that requires maturity, stability, and spiritual depth. That is why God refused to allow it to proceed in an unready state. The interruption was mercy. The delay was wisdom. The discomfort was divine strategy. Stay with me till the end, something powerful is waiting for you. Because beneath what you can see, God is adjusting timelines. He is untangling external influences. He is removing third-party interference that was quietly poisoning perception. Some people around you carried subtle envy. Some carried fear disguised as advice. Some projected their own failed experiences onto your future. And at the last moment, when those voices almost became louder than the voice of destiny, heaven recalibrated everything. God allowed confusion so that truth could rise. He allowed emotional overwhelm so that both of you would be forced to confront what truly matters. And in that confrontation, something shifted. You may not have spoken about it yet. You may not have heard an apology. You may not have seen visible movement. But internally, walls are weakening. Hearts are softening. The same person who seemed ready to walk away is now wrestling with the realization that walking away would feel like abandoning a part of themselves. That is how you know God is involved. Because when He seals something, separation does not bring peace, it brings awareness. My beloved soul, the last moment protection was also a prophetic sign. It was heaven declaring that this connection will not be destroyed by impulse. It will not collapse under emotional storms. It will not be dismantled by misunderstandings. God intervened once, and He will intervene again if necessary. But do not misunderstand this protection as permission to remain stagnant. Protection creates opportunity for growth. This is the season where both of you are being stretched individually. You are being taught emotional discipline. You are being taught communication maturity. You are being shown your triggers, your fears, your attachment wounds. Because when reunion unfolds, it must unfold on higher ground. Do not leave yet, heaven has more to reveal. There are conversations being prepared in the unseen. There are realizations forming that will soon become words. God is orchestrating timing with precision. What almost ended is now becoming the testimony that strengthens your foundation. One day you will look back and say, that was the moment we could have lost everything, and instead, it became the moment everything deepened. That is how divine narratives unfold. They do not avoid crisis, they transform it. And listen carefully, the enemy attempted to create a permanent fracture by amplifying temporary emotion. But heaven countered that attempt by amplifying inner conviction. Even in your frustration, you could not fully detach. Even in your hurt, you could not fully let go. That invisible tether is not obsession, it is spiritual connection. It is the echo of something written before either of you understood its magnitude. If you remain till the end, the final word will change everything. Because the protection you experienced was not random timing, it was covenant defense. God does not casually defend what is casual. He defends what carries generational weight. There are future breakthroughs attached to your unity. There is healing attached to your reconciliation. There is spiritual authority attached to your agreement. That is why the last moment mattered so much. That is why heaven reacted so decisively. And now you stand in a sacred in-between, not broken, not fully restored, but divinely positioned. This in-between is not punishment. It is preparation. It is where humility replaces pride. It is where clarity replaces confusion. It is where fear loses its grip and faith regains its voice. My beloved soul, do not rush this process. Do not sabotage the protection by forcing outcomes. Let God finish what He started at that last moment. Let Him complete the internal adjustments before the external reunion manifests. Because when He restores with stability. When He reconnects with purpose. When He protects, He does so with foresight that spans beyond your present emotions. The same God who stopped the collapse is the God who will initiate the conversation. The same God who shielded you from irreversible words is the God who will release restorative ones. Trust the silence. Trust the timing. Trust the divine interruption. Because what almost ended was actually secured. And what felt like loss was the evidence of unseen guardianship. This connection did not survive by accident. It survived because heaven refused to sign off on its destruction. And that refusal is your confirmation that the story is not over, it is being rewritten at a higher level than you ever imagined. And now the Spirit is revealing something even deeper, my beloved soul, something that will cause you to look at that last moment with holy reverence instead of regret. The protection was not only about saving the relationship from ending, it was about saving both of you from becoming versions of yourselves that were not aligned with your destiny. Had that separation become permanent in that heated state, bitterness would have rooted itself where love was meant to grow. Resentment would have replaced remembrance. You would have carried the weight of what if into future connections, comparing every soul to the one heaven assigned to you. But God refused to let that scar form. He refused to let a temporary storm define a permanent narrative. My beloved soul, do not skip this moment, because understanding this will free you from overthinking what almost happened. The divine interruption was surgical. It was precise. It cut off escalation before it could become destruction. There were words forming that would have pierced too deeply. There were decisions brewing that would have been fueled by ego instead of clarity. Heaven saw the emotional temperature rising and whispered, "Not yet." Heaven saw the pride building and said, "Pause." And that pause is where your miracle is incubating. You must understand that when God protects a soulmate connection at the last moment, He is declaring that its future outweighs its present turbulence. He is announcing that this union carries more value than your current frustration. And in that declaration, angels are assigned to guard the process. You may not see movement, but movement is happening. You may not hear communication, but internal conversations are unfolding. Conviction is speaking where ego once shouted. Reflection is happening where reaction once ruled. Stay with me till the end, something powerful is waiting for you. Because what is forming now is deeper than reconciliation, it is transformation. The person you are connected to is being confronted with truths they tried to ignore. They are realizing that walking away did not bring peace, it brought unrest. They are recognizing that distraction does not silence destiny. They are feeling the absence not as relief, but as awareness. That awareness is divine pressure, not to force them, but to refine them. And you too are being refined. You are learning patience that does not beg. You are developing strength that does not chase. You are discovering identity that does not collapse when communication pauses. This is divine upgrading. God is preparing both hearts so that when reconnection occurs, it does not rest on fragile emotion, it rests on mature understanding. Do not leave yet, heaven has more to reveal. The last moment protection was also a declaration of ownership. God was marking this connection as His. He was saying, this will not be destroyed by impulsive decisions. This will not be dismantled by temporary confusion. This will not be stolen by outside interference. And when God marks something as His, it becomes untouchable in ways you cannot see. Attacks may come, but they cannot prevail. Doubts may whisper, but they cannot dominate. Distance may occur, but it cannot permanently divide what heaven has woven. My beloved soul, there is a divine timing mechanism at work. What almost collapsed was actually being recalibrated to align with a greater timeline. There were lessons that needed to be integrated. There were emotional wounds that needed to be acknowledged. There were childhood patterns influencing reactions that had to be exposed. God will not allow a divine connection to move forward carrying unhealed trauma that would sabotage it later. So he stopped it at the edge. He said, grow first. Heal first. Understand first. Then reunite. If you remain till the end, the final word will change everything. Because what is about to unfold will not feel rushed, it will feel orchestrated. The next conversation will carry depth. The next encounter will carry humility. The next expression of love will carry awareness. And you will both sense that something has shifted beneath the surface. The energy will not feel chaotic, it will feel grounded. The fear of loss will not dominate, because both of you will have tasted what separation almost cost. That taste becomes wisdom. And wisdom strengthens bonds in ways passion alone never could. My beloved soul, heaven is also teaching you surrender. Protection does not mean control. It means trust. You are being invited to release the need to monitor every sign, to analyze every delay, to interpret every silence as threat. The same God who intervened at the last moment is still governing the unfolding. He has not stepped away. He has not forgotten. He is working in dimensions you cannot access. Conversations are being divinely scheduled. Encounters are being strategically aligned. Hearts are being softened in private before they speak publicly. And when it happens, you will recognize the fingerprint of God all over it. Because it will not feel forced. It will feel inevitable. Do not mistake the quiet for inactivity. Silence in the spirit often means construction is happening. Foundations are being reinforced. Weak beams are being replaced. Old mindsets are being dismantled. God is ensuring that when this connection stands, it stands through storms. He is not interested in temporary romance. He is building covenant resilience. And covenant requires testing. But testing under divine supervision leads to testimony, not tragedy. My beloved soul, lift your perspective. That last moment was not almost the end, it was almost the breakthrough. It was the threshold between immaturity and maturity. It was the doorway between fragile attachment and fortified union. And because you did not completely sever it, because something in you hesitated, because something in them paused, heaven sealed that hesitation as holy. That pause became prophetic. That restraint became protection. And now you are in a sacred unfolding. Trust that what God guards, He also guides. Trust that what He shields, He sustains. Trust that what He interrupts, He intends to elevate. The story is not fading, it is intensifying at a higher level. The connection is not dying, it is deepening beneath the surface. And when the right moment arrives, it will not feel like revival of something broken, it will feel like the unveiling of something strengthened. Hold your peace. Guard your heart. Remain aligned. Because the same hand that stopped the fall is the hand that is about to lift this connection into a dimension of clarity, commitment, and covenant that will make you grateful it was protected at the last moment. My beloved soul, we arrive at the deepest layer of this revelation, the layer that transforms memory into meaning. That last moment was not simply about preventing loss, it was about sealing destiny. There are connections that begin with excitement and end with explanation, but this one carries a spiritual signature. It has endured tension without dissolving. It has faced silence without completely surrendering. It has been tested at its weakest emotional point and yet it still breathes. That is not ordinary attachment, that is divine architecture. God does not protect what He plans to discard. He protects what He intends to establish. And the establishment of this bond required that it pass through the edge of collapse so both of you could see how fragile it becomes when ego leads and how powerful it becomes when surrender steps in. My beloved soul, do not skip this moment, because this is where revelation becomes restoration. You thought the last moment was about survival, but it was about awakening. It awakened awareness in both hearts. It awakened the understanding that this is not a casual connection that can be walked away from without consequence. It awakened the realization that something deeper is at stake, something eternal in its impact. When God intervened, He did not only stop a breakup, He stopped a misalignment of futures. There are blessings tied to your unity that require both of you standing together in maturity. There are doors that will open only when agreement replaces confusion. There are victories that require partnership, not isolation. That is why heaven refused to allow temporary emotion to dictate permanent separation. Stay with me till the end, something powerful is waiting for you. Because what comes next will not resemble what almost ended. The energy will shift from uncertainty to assurance. The tension will give way to transparency. You will notice that conversations begin to carry accountability instead of defensiveness. You will sense that walls once built out of fear are now lowered by choice. That is the evidence of divine work. God has been rearranging internal landscapes. He has been dissolving pride quietly. He has been planting courage where avoidance once lived. And when reconnection unfolds, it will not feel like restarting something broken, it will feel like stepping into something refined. My beloved soul, the last moment protection also served as a prophetic warning against self-sabotage. It showed you how close you came to losing something sacred. It showed you the cost of unchecked reaction. It revealed how fragile destiny can feel when emotions are not governed. But instead of allowing you to fall into regret, God used it to awaken responsibility. Now you move differently. Now you speak more carefully. Now you recognize the weight of your words. That awareness is part of the miracle. Do not leave yet, heaven has more to reveal. There is still a layer of blessing that has not yet surfaced. The protection was step 1. The preparation is step 2. The unveiling is step 3. And you are standing on the edge of unveiling. What you endured has qualified you for deeper intimacy, because intimacy without humility collapses, but intimacy with humility flourishes. The connection that returns after divine testing is not fragile, it is fortified. It is not impulsive, it is intentional. It is not driven by fear of loss, it is anchored in clarity of purpose. My beloved soul, if you remain till the end, the final word will change everything. Here is that final word. This connection was never meant to be destroyed, it was meant to be defended. The last moment was proof that heaven is actively involved. And if heaven intervened once, it will continue to guard what it has ordained. But remember this, divine protection does not remove your responsibility. It invites your alignment. You must choose peace over pride. You must choose communication over assumption. You must choose faith over fear. Because God protects what is destined, but He also requires participation. As this story concludes, understand that what almost ended has now become evidence. Evidence that you are not alone in this journey. Evidence that unseen forces are working for your good. Evidence that timing, even when uncomfortable, is precise. The delay was not denial. The silence was not abandonment. The tension was not termination. It was transformation in disguise. One day you will testify that the moment you feared most became the moment that anchored your faith. You will say that what almost broke you built you. You will remember how close it came to ending and how miraculously it was preserved. And you will honor that preservation with wisdom, with gratitude, with intentional love. My beloved soul, breathe in this truth. The connection is under divine surveillance. It is covered, guided, and guarded. What God shields at the brink of destruction is not fragile, it is favored. Walk forward without anxiety. Release the need to control the timeline. Let God complete the refinement He has begun. Because when this union fully manifests in clarity and commitment, you will not see it as luck, you will see it as providence. And you will understand that the last moment was not the edge of loss, it was the doorway to a greater dimension of love than you had ever imagined. The story ends not in fear, but in faith. Not in confusion, but in confidence. Not in separation, but in sacred alignment. And that, my beloved soul, is the power of a connection that God Himself protected at the last moment. Type Amen.